All right, let's just jump right in, because this title, it's a real head-scratcher. You'd think divorce is pretty straightforward, right? You prove one person is at fault, and that's that. But what if I told you the law has these hidden tripwires that could completely flip the case, even if you think you have rock-solid proof?
So picture this. You've caught your spouse cheating. I mean, you have the texts, the photos, the whole deal. It seems like a total open and shut case. You're walking into that courtroom thinking, this is a slam dunk. But is it really?
And right there, that's the twist. The court isn't just going to look at what your spouse did. Oh no, it's going to put your actions under a microscope too. See, the law has this really fascinating principle. Basically, if you're the one asking for justice, you'd better be coming from a place of justice yourself.
And this is the phrase that changes everything. It's an old legal saying, but it's the absolute key to understanding how a seemingly guilty spouse could actually walk away winning. So what does that even mean, having clean hands when you're in a divorce court?
Well, it all comes down to a set of legal hurdles called bars to matrimonial relief. The best way to think of them is like stop signs that the court can throw up, blocking your path to a divorce, even if you have perfectly valid reasons for wanting one.
And here's the key takeaway. These bars are all about you, the person filing for divorce. It's not enough to prove your spouse messed up. You also have to prove that you didn't do anything to cause it, or allow it, or, forgive it and move on. Yeah, the burden of proof is actually on you to prove your hands are clean.
And look, we're not talking about some minor legal loophole here. In Indian law, for example, these are what they call absolute bars. That means if one of these situations applies, the judge has to deny the divorce. It's not up to them. A divorce that gets granted when it shouldn't have been can even be declared a total nullity, like it never happened. That's how serious this is.
Okay, let's break this down. First up, we're going to look at the major category of these bars, the ones where your own actions are directly tied to what your spouse did wrong.
This is like the most direct version of that clean hands rule we talked about. The law is basically saying, hey, you can't start a fire and then run to us for help because you got burned. It's a really powerful and frankly logical check on your behavior.
Let's use a real-world example. Let's say a husband's behavior is just so awful, so cruel, that his wife has no choice but to pack her bags and leave for her own safety. Could he then turn around and sue her for divorce on the grounds of desertion? The court's going to say absolutely not. His own terrible behavior is what caused the very thing he's complaining about.
Okay, this is where it gets a little tricky, but it's super important. The difference between being an accessory and something called connivance, especially when you're talking about adultery. Being an accessory is active. You are literally helping the cheating happen. The example here is, well, it's extreme, but it's crystal clear. Connivance, though, is more passive. It's described as a corrupt consent. You're not helping set it up, but you see it coming, and you just kind of look the other way, wink at it, and let it happen.
All right, let's talk about the next one, condonation. This is a big one. It's really just the legal term for forgiving something major. But it's not as simple as just saying, I forgive you. For it to count in court, there are two steps. First, you have to forgive the act, knowing everything about what happened. And second, you have to actually reinstate your spouse to their old position in the marriage.
And this is a perfect example of what I mean. Actions speak louder than words. Resuming life together, and especially resuming a sexual relationship, is seen by the court as the strongest possible proof of both forgiveness and reinstatement. You can't just have one without the other. You can't say you forgive them, but then make them sleep on the couch forever. The law says the forgiveness has to be complete.
So, this probably has you wondering, if you forgive your spouse for something like cheating and you take them back, does that mean you can never ever bring it up in court again, no matter what they do down the road?
And the answer is pretty fascinating. Not necessarily. The law has this idea called revival. A good way to think about it is that when you condone something, you're basically putting your spouse on probation. If they mess up again, even with something different, that original forgiven act gets revived. So, say a wife forgives her husband for cheating. A few months later, he starts being verbally abusive. Now, that abuse might not be enough on its own for a cruelty case, but it's enough misconduct to revive the original adultery. And just like that, the cheating is back on the table as grounds for divorce. Probation's over.
All right, so that's all about your actions inside the marriage. But guess what? There's a whole other set of rules about how you actually use or misuse the court system itself.
First on the list is something called collusion. And this is a huge deal to the courts because they see it as a direct attack on the justice system.
It's more than just lying. It's when a couple conspires to fool the judge. They pretend to be enemies in court, but secretly, they've worked together to fake evidence or hide facts just to get the divorce they want.
You want to hear a classic example of this? It's almost like something out of a movie. They were called the hotel bill cases. Back in the day, when adultery was pretty much the only ticket to a divorce, a couple would secretly agree to stage an affair. The husband would check into a hotel with a friend, they'd make sure people saw them, they'd get a bill as proof, and then the wife would use this totally fake evidence in court. It was a complete charade to get around a very strict legal system.
All right, now for one that might sound a little weird at first. We're always told to think things through, not to rush into big decisions. But in divorce court, waiting too long can actually sink your entire case. So, why is that?
Well, you gotta put yourself in the judge's shoes. A long, unexplained delay just looks suspicious. It suggests a few things that could weaken your case. A judge might think, maybe you actually forgave them. Or, if this was so terrible, why did you wait 5 years to do anything about it? It makes them question if you were really hurt by it or if you've just kind of accepted it. And maybe the biggest red flag is that it suggests you might have some other secret reason for filing now, like maybe your spouse is about to get a big inheritance. The court needs to know you're not just being opportunistic.
But, and this is a really important but, the law doesn't exist in a vacuum. The courts, especially in a place like India, get that there can be intense social pressure to wait. Things like the fear of bringing shame on the family, that public odium, or protecting the family's reputation, or even worrying that your divorce could mess up a younger sibling's chance at marriage, those are often seen as completely reasonable excuses for a delay. It's up to the court to figure out if the delay was sincere or strategic. Okay, so after going through all these really intricate rules, clean hands, connivance, collusion, delay, you kind of have to step back and ask the big question, why? Why do these rules even exist? Well, these rules are basically relics from an older way of thinking called the fault theory of divorce. In that world, marriage was seen as a sacred institution that had to be preserved no matter what. A divorce was a last resort, and it could only happen if you could prove one person was the villain and the other person was a total, blameless saint. The law acted like a moral referee. So that's a lot to take in. Before we wrap up, let's just nail down 3 really important takeaways from all of this. First, your own hands have got to be clean. The court is going to look at your behavior just as closely as your spouse's. Second, forgiveness is an action, and it has real legal consequences. Once you've condoned something, you can't just change your mind, unless it gets revived. And third, how you deal with the court itself is huge. Any hint of deception or just waiting too long without a good reason can destroy your case. And that brings us to our final question. Today, so many places are moving toward no-fault divorce, where the point isn't to blame someone, but just to admit the marriage is broken. So in that modern world, are these clean hands rules still fair? Or are they just outdated ideas from a time that doesn't really exist anymore? It's a tough question, and it's one that courts and society are still figuring out.